We were supposed to close on the house on a Thursday. I remember that morning clearly because I had taken the day off work for the first time in almost 8 months, and the feeling of waking up without an alarm felt almost foreign. The kind of morning where everything is still, and for a few minutes you just lie there, aware that something big is about to happen, and you let yourself feel it before the logistics take over. My husband and I had been looking for nearly 2 years, not casually, seriously, exhaustingly, making offers and losing them, driving through neighborhoods on weeknights after work, adjusting our budget, adjusting our expectations, circling back to the same listings when nothing new came up. It was the kind of process that either breaks a couple or fuses them together in some new way, and we came out the other side with something I hadn't expected, a real sense of what we wanted. Not just in a house, in a life. The house we found was a 1940s craftsman in a quiet part of town about 20 minutes from both of our jobs. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard with an oak tree that had clearly been there longer than the house itself. The kitchen needed updating and the bathroom tile was 30 years past its prime. But the bones were right, and the light in the late afternoon came through the front windows at an angle that made everything look like it was lit from the inside. We made an offer the same day we toured it. My mother-in-law found out 2 days later, not because we told her, because my husband mentioned it to his sister, who mentioned it to her, and by the time my phone rang that evening, the information had already traveled its full circuit. "I heard you're buying a house," she said, before I'd even gotten through hello. My husband was in the kitchen. I walked to the back porch, keeping my voice even. "We are," I said. "We were going to tell you soon. We just wanted to wait until things were more settled." "Settled," she repeated. "You're making one of the biggest financial decisions of your lives, and you didn't think to mention it?" I didn't take the bait. I explained where it was, the general neighborhood, that we were excited. I kept the details surface level, casual, the kind of update you give someone when you love them, but have learned, over years, that more information means more commentary. She had a lot of questions, which wasn't unusual. She had questions about everything. What was the square footage? How old was the roof? Had we gotten an inspection? Had we used a real estate attorney or just the agent? Did we know that you should always use a real estate attorney in this state? Did my husband know that his father's cousin had bought in that part of town in the 90s and it hadn't appreciated the way they'd hoped? I answered what I answered and deflected what I deflected. And when we hung up, I stood on the porch for a minute before going back inside. The air smelled like cut grass and diesel from the street. I thought, this is manageable. I can do this. We're buying a house. Nothing she says changes that. I should have known that it wasn't the questions that were the problem. It was what came after them. In the weeks between accepted offer and closing, my mother-in-law called more than usual. "Checking in," she said. "Just wanted to see how it's going." She had a contractor she wanted us to use for the kitchen renovation. Someone her church friend had recommended. She had thoughts about the bathroom tile. She had a friend in staging who could help us figure out how to set up the rooms. Not that we'd asked, but just in case. Each call was warm. Genuinely warm, in the way she always was. That was the complicated part. She wasn't cold or cruel. She was attentive in a way that could feel like love and feel like surveillance simultaneously, depending on which way the wind was blowing. My husband, whose name is Joel, is good at a lot of things. He's patient and funny, and the kind of person who remembers to check in on people when they're going through something. What he has always struggled with is saying no to his mother. Not because he doesn't see the problem, but because he was raised in a house where her comfort set the temperature for everything else, and some patterns take longer to unlearn than others. I knew this when I married him. I'd learned to work around it, to pick my battles, to give information strategically, protect what mattered, and let the small things go. But some things aren't small. The week before closing, my mother-in-law came to visit. She lived about 4 hours away, and the visit was framed as being in town for a dental appointment, which may have been true, but the timing was not a coincidence. She stayed 2 nights with us in our apartment. She brought food, which was kind. She asked about the house, which was expected. What I didn't expect was that she asked for the address, not the neighborhood. The specific address. I told her we'd share everything once we were settled in. She smiled and said, of course, and I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days before closing, I got a call from our realtor. "Hey," she said, and I could already hear something in her tone that made me set down what I was holding. "So there's a situation I need to walk you through. There's been some activity on the property." "What kind of activity?" I said. "Someone reached out to the sellers directly. Not through us, directly. Offered some feedback about the inspection report and asked whether they'd be willing to renegotiate certain terms." I sat down. "Who?" I said. There was a pause, just long enough to tell me she already knew and that this was the part she'd been dreading telling me. She described the exchange without naming names, but she didn't need to. The questions a person had asked, the references to specific items in the inspection report, details that had only been shared with family, made it clear enough. I thanked her. I told her we'd handle it on our end. I hung up and stayed very still for about 30 seconds, the way you do when something has happened that you can't unhappen and your brain is quietly working out the order of operations for what comes next. Then I called Joel. He picked up on the second ring. He was at work, I could hear the background noise of his office, and I said, "Can you step outside for a minute?" He could tell from my voice that it wasn't a casual call. He stepped outside. I told him what the realtor had said. I told him everything, in the order I'd heard it, without commentary, without editorializing. I laid it flat and let him look at it. Silence on his end. "Then how did she get the address?" "I don't know," I said. "But she got it." More silence. And then something that surprised me. He said, "I'm going to call her." Not "I'm so sorry," not "Are you sure it was her?" not "Let me think about this." He said he was going to call her. Right then. "Okay," I said. "I'll call you back," he said. "I'll call you back," he said. I want to tell you that I handled that 30-minute wait with grace. I didn't. I cleaned the kitchen twice and rearranged a drawer I had already organized the week before, and I stood at the window looking out at the parking lot of our apartment complex, thinking about all the years of navigating carefully and giving ground strategically and deciding which things were worth saying something about. I thought about the 2-year search. I thought about the oak tree. I thought about the light through the front windows. My phone rang. "She did it," Joel said. He said it quietly. The way you say something when you already knew but were hoping to be wrong. I asked him what she'd said. She said she was protecting us, that she'd read the inspection report we'd shared with her, and she was worried we were rushing into a bad deal. She didn't think we understood what we were agreeing to. And I told her she didn't have the right to do that." He paused. "I told her it wasn't her decision." I let the words sit for a second. "How did she take it?" "She cried," he said. "And then she told me she was only trying to help. And I told her that what she did wasn't help, that help is what you offer. What she did was something else." That was the moment things changed. Not loudly, not with any kind of resolution that tied itself up neatly, but something shifted in the way a foundation shifts. You don't always see it, but you feel the difference in the way everything above it sits. We closed on the house that Thursday. The sellers had not renegotiated anything, and our realtor had handled the interference with a professionalism I was genuinely grateful for. We sat across a long table and signed our names on what felt like 400 pages of documents, and when it was over, the title agent slid a small envelope across the table with 2 keys inside. And Joel and I looked at each other in the way you do when something you've waited a long time for actually arrives. We drove to the house directly from closing. We didn't have the moving truck until Saturday, so there was nothing there yet. Just empty rooms, the smell of old wood and cleaning supplies, the particular quiet of a place that's been waiting. We walked through every room. We didn't say much. There was something about the silence that felt like it deserved to just be held for a minute. In the kitchen, Joel leaned against the counter and said, "My mom wants to come help with the move." I turned toward him. "She called while you were in the bathroom at the title office," he said. "She wants to drive up Saturday." I looked at him for a moment. "And what did you say?" "I said I'd talk to you." That was new. Usually he would have said yes first and sorted out my reaction later. The fact that he'd said he'd talk to me first, that was something. "I think we need the first few days to be ours," I said. "Just us. We can see her after we're settled." He nodded slowly, like he was rolling the idea around, checking it for cracks. "That's fair," he said. It's not a punishment, I added. It's just, this should be ours first. He called her that evening while I was putting shelf liner in the kitchen cabinets. I wasn't trying to listen, but the apartment we were still sleeping in was small, and I caught pieces of it. I heard him say that we needed the weekend to be just us. I heard him say that we'd love to have her visit once we were more settled. I heard the tone of his voice. Not apologetic, not compensating. Just calm. Clear. The way you speak to someone when you're saying something true and you don't need them to approve of it. There was a stretch of quiet when she must have been speaking, and then I heard him say, "Mom, I need you to hear me on this one." I set down the shelf liner. I stood very still in that kitchen. And then he said, "This is our home. We need to start it the way we want to." She didn't come that weekend. Moving day was loud and chaotic and wonderful. We had two friends who showed up with coffee and strong opinions about furniture placement. And by mid-afternoon, the main rooms were mostly functional, and we ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room because the couch wasn't where it was supposed to be yet. It was exactly what I had wanted. Not perfect, just ours. But 2 days later, while I was at work, I got a text from Joel that made me pause. "My mom is here," he wrote. Then she drove up this morning. She said she wanted to surprise us. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I typed, "I'm coming home at lunch." When I got there, she was in the kitchen. She had brought groceries, a full bag of them, and she had already started organizing our pantry. Not the way I had arranged it the week before, but differently. Her way. Items grouped by her logic. Labels facing outward in the specific manner that had always been hers. She looked up when I came in and smiled. Warm. Genuine. "I couldn't stay away," she said. "I wanted to see it." I looked at the pantry. I looked at the counter, where she had also moved the coffee maker to the left side, and where a small decorative dish she'd brought was sitting next to the sink. "You should have called," I said. "I wanted it to be a surprise. Don't you love it?" I reorganized. "I had it how I wanted it," I said, quietly, without apology. She paused. A small pause, but I caught it. "Oh, I just thought, I know what you thought," I said, "but this is our home. We get to decide how things are arranged." Joel came in from the backyard then, and I watched the flash of something in his face when he saw my expression. Not alarm, but attention. He read the room quickly. "Mom," he said, setting his coffee down. "We talked about this weekend." "I know," she said, "but I missed you." And I thought, "What you thought," he said, "and what we agreed to aren't the same thing." She looked at him the way she always did when he pushed back. A combination of surprise and something working behind the eyes. Some quick recalibration. For most of their lives, the recalibration had ended with him softening, retreating just enough to close the distance. This time he didn't. "You drove 4 hours without telling us," he said. "You came into our home when we weren't here." "The key was under the mat," she said. "You mentioned it on the phone?" "We mentioned it for emergencies," I said. Another pause, longer this time. The kitchen was very quiet. "I don't understand why you're making this into something," she said. Her voice had shifted, still composed but with a thread of something tight underneath it. "I came to help. I brought food. I'm your mother." "You are," Joel said, "and I love you. And this wasn't okay." The word landed differently when it came from him. Not from me. Not the daughter-in-law with the complicated position, the one who could always be framed as difficult or unwelcoming. From him. Her son. Who had, in 30-some years of knowing her, almost never told her that something she did wasn't okay. She didn't cry this time. She straightened. She picked up her purse from the counter. "I was just trying to be helpful," she said. "I know," Joel said, "but we need you to help differently." She left an hour later. Not in anger exactly, she wasn't the dramatic exit type, but she left without the warmth she'd arrived with, and the dish she'd brought stayed on the counter. And I didn't move it for 3 days, because I wasn't sure what to do with it, and also because some part of me wanted to decide, in my own time, whether it stayed or went. It went. That evening, Joel and I sat on the back porch. The oak tree was doing something the late afternoon light seemed to approve of, throwing long shadows across the grass in a way that made everything feel slower than it was. We didn't talk right away. We'd gotten good at that kind of quiet in the months of house hunting, the kind where you don't need to fill it. "She's going to say I've changed," he said eventually. "You have," I said. He looked at me sidelong. Is that okay? It's why I married you, I said. Not that you'd stay the same forever, that you could. He was quiet for a while after that. Then I keep thinking about the inspection report thing. That was months ago and I let it go. I smoothed it over and moved on. You handled it, I said. I handled it the way I always handle things. Made sure she didn't feel too bad about it. Didn't make it too real. He paused. She showed up today because nothing has ever had a real consequence. Not from me. I didn't argue with that because it was true and he knew it was true, and the fact that he was saying it out loud, plainly, without asking me to manage the weight of it, that was its own kind of change. We called her the next evening together. Speakerphone at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where she had rearranged my pantry, which I had since put back the way I wanted it. Joel spoke first. He told her we loved her and that he was glad she'd wanted to see the house. He told her what he also needed her to understand, that coming without being asked, with a key that had been shared in passing for emergencies, and reorganizing our space without permission, those things weren't expressions of love, they were overrides. And he needed them to stop. She was quiet for a moment, then she said she hadn't seen it that way. I know, he said, but I need you to try. She asked if she could visit on a real visit, a planned one. We said yes, absolutely. We gave her a weekend 3 weeks out. We told her we'd have the guest room set up by then. She came on that weekend and it was different. She brought flowers, not groceries. She asked where things went before she touched them. She sat at the kitchen table and had coffee and talked about her own house and her garden and a book she was reading, and it felt, for the first time in years, like a visit between adults who had chosen to be in the same room. It wasn't a transformation. I'm Robert telling you that one conversation rewired decades of habit, because that isn't how people work. There were still moments when the old pattern tried to surface. A comment here, a suggestion offered with a little too much certainty, a question that was really an instruction wearing a question mark. But Joel caught them now. Not harshly, not in a way that was meant to shame her, just a small redirect, a quiet correction, the maintenance of a line that was now visible where before it had been erased so many times it had stopped existing. And she adjusted. Not all at once, and not without friction. But she adjusted. Because when the pattern stopped working, when it consistently, predictably stopped working, there was nothing left to do but find a different one. What I learned is that the thing that had kept the dynamic in place for so long wasn't my mother-in-law's personality, exactly. It was the absence of a wall. She moved into whatever space was available, the way anyone will if there's room. The room had just always been there. Joel had always made it, because he'd been taught from the beginning that making room was what love looked like. That being the good son meant absorbing the discomfort so she didn't have to. Unhooking from that wasn't one conversation. It was 10 and then 20 and then a new normal that felt uncomfortable before it felt like relief. But it does feel like relief. That's the part I want you to know. If you're in the middle of something that feels unresolvable, the relief comes not from winning or from changing someone else's character, but from no longer needing them to be different in order for your life to feel like yours. Our house still has the oak tree. The kitchen is set up the way I set it up. In the evening sometimes, when the light comes through the front windows at that angle I fell in love with on the first tour, I stand in the living room and I let myself feel how quiet it is, how completely undramatically ours it is. How completely undramatically ours it is. That took a long time to get to, and it was worth every single step. If something in this story sat with you, if you've ever felt the weight of someone making decisions that were supposed to be yours, I hope this reminds you that drawing a line isn't the same as closing a door. It's just deciding clearly and firmly where the threshold is, and then holding it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Looking back, I don't think my mother-in-law ever woke up one morning and decided to be controlling. That's the thing nobody tells you about these situations. It's rarely that deliberate, at least not at first. It starts smaller than that. A comment here. A suggestion offered just a little too firmly, a boundary tested once, and when it holds no consequence, test it again. And again. Until one day, you look up and realize the space that was supposed to be yours has been quietly, incrementally filled by someone else's presence and preferences and decisions. That's what had happened with us. Not through cruelty, but through consistency. She had learned over years that the space would be made, that Joel would soften things, that I would absorb what I could and redirect the rest, that nothing she did would ever land with enough weight to actually change the pattern. The inspection report, the phone calls, showing up at our door with groceries and her own version of how our kitchen should be organized. Each thing, taken alone, could be explained, could be excused, could be filed under the category of she means well and left there. But causes compound. That's just how it works. Small permissions accumulate into large ones, and what starts as someone nudging the edges of your life can become, over time, someone standing in the middle of it. What shifted for Joel wasn't one dramatic realization. It was slower than that. It was the realtor's phone call. It was standing in an empty kitchen on closing day and saying we'd talk before giving an answer. It was choosing, one moment at a time, to stop absorbing and start responding. That kind of change requires something most people underestimate, not courage in the loud sense, but the quieter kind. The willingness to stay uncomfortable through someone else's disappointment. To hold a position even when the other person is someone you love and they are making their displeasure very clear. That's what I mean when I say this took intelligence and not just emotion, because the emotional impulse when someone you care about is upset with you is to close the distance, to smooth it, to say sorry faster than you mean it. What takes real thought is recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, for the other person, for the relationship itself, is to hold firm anyway. And the perseverance part, that's the piece no one talks about enough. Because after the first boundary conversation, there was another, and after that, another. The pattern didn't dissolve because we named it once. It changed because we kept showing up the same way, over and over, until the other way stopped being available. That kind of consistency is its own form of strength, and it is built choice by choice, not granted all at once. Joel's mother adjusted, not completely, not without friction, but she adjusted. Because that's what people do when the old way genuinely stops working. They find a different one. And the visit 3 weeks later, the one where she brought flowers instead of groceries and asked before she touched anything, that wasn't a miracle. It was the result of something being held long enough that it had to be reckoned with. Our home still has the oak tree. The pantry is still arranged the way I set it up. Some things, once you've decided they're yours, stay that way. That's the part worth holding on to.